again, welcome to Astronomy Toronto. Not live, but taped on May 30th, 1984 in the bustling town of Cleveland, North Carolina. My name's Randy Attwood. I'm the host of Toronto's monthly astronomical news magazine, and we're only 18 minutes, less than 18 minutes now, until the annular eclipse of the sun. I'm out of breath. We've been driving all morning, and with me now is the coordinator for the Toronto Centre eclipse trip, Mike Watson. Mike, that was a cliffhanger.
It really was. We started out in Petersburg this morning, absolutely pouring rain. We've been driving through rain all the way from Toronto. We drove through rain and cloud all the way down to Greensboro, North Carolina, and in the last half hour we drove right out of it, right into the sun. It's starting to look really good.
Well, I don't think any clouds can come in. It's a bit windy, but boy, to set up so quickly, it's just amazing.
Well, it's fantastic. We roared in here into this little town that can't have more than about 500 people. We had picked out on the topographic maps this school. We thought there'd probably be a site here. We ran into the school, talked to the principal. He said, sure, come on in, set up, and here we are.
You can really say that the Toronto Centre eclipse chasers are just that.
Absolutely. This is the first time within my memory that we've had such a cliffhanger and a really hair-raiser, but it looks like we're going to see it.
All right, Mike, we're about 17 minutes away now, and probably you can't tell it's getting dark, but we're going to keep the camera rolling now, and we're going to see just how dark it gets. What exactly are we going to see in just 30 seconds? Explain that to us.
Okay, for on camera, if we're just going to be seeing the surrounding area, it's going to start to really get dark. You'll really notice it darkening down. It's not going to last very long, probably only about 35 seconds, then the light level is going to start coming back up again. It's a very brief eclipse.
Super. Look, we know you got things to do. We'll talk to you after the eclipse.
Okay, fantastic.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, there's just about 14 minutes left now, and I wanted to show you two things that we showed you a couple weeks ago on how to view the eclipse when it's partial. The first thing I want to show you is binoculars. And if we look down the ground, we're going to be able to see something interesting. And there we have it, perfect views of the sun partially eclipsed. And it's really a crescent now, and I can tell you the sky surroundings is really changing. It's really getting sort of murky here right now. So we only have about 13 minutes to go. One other thing I want to show you, and we'll just keep the camera on down here, that is the pinhole camera. This is what you could have seen with a pinhole camera, and that's not a bad image. That's a pretty good image of the crescent sun. Now the farther I take it away, the bigger it gets. And look at that image of the sun with a pinhole camera. That's not half bad.
Seconds!
Oh, I see Providence! I see Providence! I see Providence! I see Corona! Oh, look, I see Corona! I see Corona! Providence! Oh, incredible Providence there! Providence there! Oh, extraordinary! Oh, beautiful Providence! Can I see on this side?
I sure did.
Okay, we're past eclipse now, and I'm with Jillian Buriak, who's also from the Toronto Centre. Jillian, this is your first eclipse. What'd you think of it?
Oh, it was just amazing. I couldn't believe it. I'd never seen something like that. It was so amazing because it got so cold so quickly, so dark so quickly, and the beads around the sun, they're there and they were dazzling, and never through the whole eclipse was there an unbroken ring of sunlight.
Did you use these binoculars?
I used both. I used the binoculars with the welder's glass and with just plain welder's glass.
That's super. We could make a quick image here. Why don't you take these off and get your white sheet out. And hold it up, okay? Hold it up. Hold it up for the camera. Yep. Yeah, that's okay. That's good. And there you go.
There we go.
Hold it straight. I'll focus.
Okay.
And there we go.
Isn't that amazing?
That's super. So that's a beautiful view. Michael, half an hour ago we saw it, and can you remember what was the thing that really struck you about this annular eclipse?
The thing that struck me and amazed me that we never expected to see, that they didn't see in 1966, and as far as I am aware, they've never seen during an eclipse like this, is we saw corona. And we saw it right on the ground glass of the camera, 30 seconds before mid-eclipse and 30 seconds afterwards. We saw it for a full 1 minute. We saw chromosphere, the pink outer envelope of the sun, right around 180 degrees around the sun. We saw prominences. We actually saw a little bit of structure, some brushes in the corona. It was unbelievable. Yeah, I remember right just before the first part of the entire moon was covering the sun, we could see right at the 9 o'clock position, maybe you remember that, one little prominence. There wasn't a lot of prominences, but one little prominence, and then suddenly what filled the view was, for 180 degrees, the red chromosphere. That's right. And then interspersing around the chromosphere, we had these brilliant beads all the way through. And then after mid-eclipse, we saw more prominences. I counted about 3 on the western limb of the sun. It was unbelievable.
Tell me a bit about the darkness.
Well, it really came down. The light really diminished. The street lights came on. The temperature really decreased an awful lot. It became noticeably cooler, and the wind died. And that was something we were a little concerned about before, because the telescopes, were blowing around a little. Very still. The light took on a sort of grayish cast, and it was incredible.
Did you look at it just with your naked eye?
I looked at it naked eye, but you can't see very much naked eye. I found last summer at the eclipse in Indonesia that you could see a lot more right looking on the ground glass of the camera, right through the camera viewfinder, because it diminishes the brightness of the photosphere, or bright surface of the sun, without diminishing in any way the corona and the brightness of the corona. Naked eye, I don't know anybody who just looked at a naked eye who actually saw corona. There may have been a couple of people, but I don't think you could do that.
Right.
Whereas with a long focal length, looking right through the camera, you could see it easily, and you can see structure in the corona. It's a little bit of a few brushes and so on.
Mike, tell us a bit about the setup you have here, and maybe through the magic of television, we'll be able to put up a few of the slides that are still in your camera up over this.
I hope so.
What were you doing here? Here's the ground glass here that you used.
Yeah, this is the main camera. This is a telescope with a 10-inch or 25-centimeter mirror. It has a focal length of 2,500 millimeters, which makes it like a 2,500 millimeter telephoto lens. There's a focal reducing lens in the back here that reduces or compresses that focal length to 1,500 millimeters and gives the whole system an f6 speed. There's a Canon f1 camera, which has a motor drive on it, which is controlled by this cable release, and I just fired off the exposures. So that was the main instrument that I used to photograph the eclipse. Then there are various auxiliary cameras here basically for backup and using different focal lengths. For example, this camera on this arm has a 500 millimeter f8 lens. It's got an automatic motor drive. I just locked it on and let it just shoot 36 exposures. Same thing with this lens on top. It's a 750 millimeter f6 lens, same kind of camera and drive system. Then there's another camera over on the far side of the telescope, which was used to photograph the sun and Venus. And that was really the other remarkable feature of this eclipse, is that Venus was located only 4 degrees away from the eclipse sun. Yeah. It was very close. Venus is always the third brightest object in the sky, and starting about 5 or 4 minutes before mid-eclipse, we could see Venus. In fact, you pointed it out, and then we watched it for about 5 minutes afterwards, and it was very plain and very obvious, and I think we could probably photograph it.
Well, super. Hopefully we, as I say, when we get to do a bit of editing, we'll be able to put some of those slides over and take a look.
So it was unbelievable.
So eclipse fever has really hit the people here in Cleveland, North Carolina. When's the next eclipse that we can see anywhere?
The next eclipse is going to be the total eclipse of the sun visible in Papua New Guinea, November 22nd, 23rd of this year.
And I think we're going to be there.
There are going to be 6 of us who are probably going to be there.
Thanks, Michael.
All right.
Hello. Well, we're back in our studios here on Adelaide Street, back in Toronto, a few weeks after the eclipse. A bit calmer, but still quite excited about the whole experience. As you saw in the previous videotape, we were very fortunate to see a very, very beautiful eclipse. And in the remaining few minutes of this half hour, I've got Mike Watson here with me, and we're going to talk about the eclipse that we saw in Cleveland, North Carolina. Michael, in retrospect, before we went down, we knew that we were going to see quite an event, and a lot of people were saying it was going to be unusual. Why was that eclipse so unusual?
Probably the best way to explain why this was an unusual eclipse is this. As we all know, eclipses of the sun can occur only at new moon. But we also know, I suppose, from our grade school science that the moon orbits the Earth not in a circular orbit, but in an elliptical orbit. And sometimes it's closer, which we call perigee, and sometimes it's farther away, which we call apogee. If a solar eclipse happens when the moon is close to the Earth at perigee, then the apparent size of the moon at mid-eclipse can block out the entire surface of the sun. If, on the other hand, the eclipse occurs when the moon is near apogee, there is a thin ring or annulus of sunlight left around the dark disk of the moon. If the eclipse occurs at a point where the moon is sort of midway between the two, then you can get a very unusual eclipse, and that's exactly what happened on May 30th. What happens is there is a very, very narrow, razor-thin annulus of sunlight left around the limb of the moon, or the edge of the moon. But because of the mountains on the edge of the moon, those mountains break that annulus up into hundreds of diamond-like points all the way around the darkened disk of the moon, and it's a very unusual phenomenon. It's been seen only once before in this century, in 1966.
We have a shot of what that looked like in 1966. If we get that up, we can look at it, and there it is. The bright part of the sun is broken up by the mountains, and there's what we see what we call Bailey's beads.
That's what you call Bailey's beads, after Francis Bailey, a French astronomer who first noted them in the last century. But the unusual thing about this eclipse is that those beads, or diamond-like points, are visible all the way around the darkened disk. And it's a phenomenon that has colloquially come to be known as the diamond necklace. It was seen by a very few handful of astronomers in Greece and Turkey on the 20th of May 1966, and then this is the next eclipse in the series.
Right, so these eclipses do follow in a logical series of 18 years, so many days afterwards, so that 18 years from now, there's going to be another one, only not as exciting as this one because of the progression. Now, that photograph that we saw, it was filtered, so it was much more dazzling than what that photograph appeared to be. We maybe should point that out.
That's right. The photograph was taken through a very dense sun filter, and it's one of the very few photographs that actually turned out from the 1966 eclipse. We decided to do something a little more daring and actually observe and photograph this eclipse without solar filters on for the 1 minute surrounding mid-eclipse.
Okay, let's go on to our next shot, which is of the path of this particular eclipse as it travels across the southeastern U.S.
Well, that's right. In 1966, as we said, the eclipse was visible in Greece and Turkey, and this year's eclipse was visible along a very narrow path, only 1 or 2 kilometers wide, that crossed the Pacific Ocean, then into Mexico, across the Gulf of Mexico, and then into the United States. And the best locations to observe this particular eclipse happened to be in the states of South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia. Then the path went off across the Atlantic and ended at sunset in the Sahara Desert.
Well, you and I, Mike, were very much involved the last couple of months, you more so, in organizing the expedition of the Toronto Centre of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada to get a busload of people down and actually see it. And I guess we didn't really know what was in store for us, but if we go to the next series of slides to give you an idea of what was involved in getting down there and the frustration of all the rain that we drove through from 1,000 miles or so, just rain. Here you are all set to take off from a rainy Toronto on that Monday night, 2 days before the eclipse.
Well, that's right. We left at 10 o'clock p.m. from Toronto, 44 observers on board a bus, and this was, I guess, about 3 hours before departure time. It was absolutely pouring in Toronto. The cars filled with telescopes and camera equipment and everything, and but it was terrible weather all the way down.
In our next shot, we'll look at basically getting loaded into a bus, and we told all the observers, bring a small bag of clothes because we're going to need the rest of the room for telescopes. And you know, we had some interesting views of people on the way down because it's certainly an all-night trip. In the next shot, we'll see one of our members, Glenn Slover, who was really tuned in and tuned out and trying to catch a bit of sleep.
He was having a good time all the way down, I think.
And our next shot shows another member, Dr. Ralph Chu, who flew to Indonesia last year to see an eclipse, and I guess he saved the blindfold for the trip, which was a good idea.
Well, contrary to what some people may believe, that actually isn't a solar filter. It's just the way he manages to sleep on the bus.
Next we have our breakfast, which I believe was in Virginia somewhere, an apple on the side of the road and a quick cup of juice, and then off we were towards Petersburg, Virginia. And again, we're still in the rain.
Well, it was cloudy and rainy all the way down. At this point, we're getting pretty discouraged because we're getting weather reports that suggest that it's going to be cloudy and rainy all through the eclipse zone for the next 2 days.
Next, we have a view of inside the bus, or outside, I guess, looking towards this rain that you're talking about, and this is getting very close to Petersburg, and it's not letting up. Next, we see inside the bus, everyone more or less enjoying the ride in our next shot, and long trip, boy. I think the idea was we were to travel, in the whole trip we traveled 57 hours, and at least we were away from Toronto for 57 hours, and of that 37 hours we were on that bus.
Well, at this point in time, you know, people have been traveling on the bus for about 11 hours, and they're very discouraged. The weather outside is just terrible, and we've got a pretty good feeling that we're not going to see the eclipse.
We did have a special site involved, or set up, and that was the Petersburg battle site. And this is a shot of our visit to the primary site that we really wanted to observe from the day before. And again, it doesn't look very good.
Well, that's right. At Christmas, I had gone down to Virginia to set up the various sites, and our primary site, as you pointed out, was in Petersburg. Mm-hmm. And we thought for sure that we'd be observing from there, but as it turned out, we got some backup sites, and we had to use them.
The next shot shows our bus as we were getting ready to go the morning of the eclipse, and it's still very wet. By this time, we knew that we had to run, and the clear weather was west of us. The problem was we didn't know how far we'd have to drive, how far we'd have to go to find clear weather.
Well, that's right. There was a big high-pressure zone out in the American Midwest, and it was moving very slowly toward Virginia and the Carolinas, and the question was whether, in fact, it would arrive before mid-eclipse, which was at about 12:30.
Well, we listened to weather reports, we phoned up different airports, and what we decided to do was all bundle into the bus, get all packed up, and leave at about 6:30 that morning, and we ended up traveling 250 miles west of our alternate site to a new site, which ended up to be in a very small town called Cleveland, North Carolina. In the next shot, we have a map of the area of North Carolina, and you can see here that the path is very, very narrow. That that large yellow blob at the bottom, I believe, is Charlotte, North Carolina.
That's right. The annular eclipse, what we were going to see, could be seen only, as you point out, within those narrow lines that sort of traverse the image there from lower left to upper right. And we had to situate ourselves within those lines in order to see what we had come to see. And therefore, we traveled along Interstate Highway 85, which closely paralleled the eclipse path, although about 20 or 30 kilometers to the south of it, until we got to the point where we decided we would turn off.
Well, the next shot is basically a shot of the map that saved the day for us, and that is a large-scale map of the Cleveland area. And Mike, you put these lines on, which were calculated lines of where the eclipse would be. And in the top left-hand corner, you see a dashed red line. Just below that, you see a dark splotch. That is West Rowan Public Junior High School, which is where we ended up in Cleveland, North Carolina, and where we saw the eclipse from, just inside the path. And in the next shot, we should have basically driving through Salisbury, North Carolina. Where'd all the clouds go? What a surprise to see the clear sky.
Well, it was an hour and a quarter before mid-eclipse, and for the first time we got sun, and the clouds just miraculously disappeared. And we were so excited we had to have a photograph like this as a keepsake.
Well, in the next shot, we have a view of our site. West Rowan Public High School, as we say. Let's move on to the next one to show a few shots here, just in rapid succession. Caution activity. There was a lot to get together.
Well,
to set up.
we got to the site barely an hour before mid-eclipse, and there was a lot of sophisticated equipment, and it takes a long time to set up the equipment, especially in a strange site, because you don't know the compass directions, how to set up your mounts, and so on, and it takes a long time.
Next shot shows us setting up a few telescopes. Next shot shows again, setting up, only an hour to go. Very exciting. Michael, here you are setting up your telescope, and one of the best ways to see the partial eclipse here is basically through binoculars. Now, we've got a videotape which has basically the last minute or so before mid-eclipse, and I just want to look at that quickly and talk over it. We saw this earlier in the show, but if we can bring that videotape up now, we'll just talk over exactly what was happening as we got to within a minute before the mid-eclipse, and then right into it.
Of course, there's a great deal of excitement as the moment of mid-eclipse approaches, and we realize that the important part of mid-eclipse really lasts only about 50 or 60 seconds for this particular eclipse. And we take the filters off the telescope.
Very brilliant light coming out of your telescope there.
Absolutely. You know, even at mid-eclipse, there was still a very large portion of the sun which was unobscured by the moon, and it made it just slightly dangerous to observe it. If you knew what you were doing, then you can do it without too much danger.
That's maybe something that we should emphasize, is that we have seen partial eclipses of the sun before, and we knew what we were doing, but even at the point where there was only a very small fraction of actual bright sunlight left, we had to be very careful not to stare at it directly, but we could move it out of the way in the telescope so we could see the fainter, more delicate parts of the sun that we were interested in viewing. And here we are coming down. We must be very close to mid-eclipse.
Well, we are. As you can see, the ambient light surrounding in the surroundings is really decreasing rapidly, and it will come down to mid-eclipse, and then the light level will increase very quickly.
This looks like mid-eclipse here, and it's amazing. The temperature actually decreased about 10 degrees Celsius. It got dark, the street lights came on, and looking at it directly with binoculars or naked eye, it was too brilliant to see, but as you mentioned in the videotape, it was best seen through the ground glass of a camera. And we have a few photos here on the set, Mike, that I'd like us to take a look at right now. Photos that you took of the eclipse just about this time, and maybe when we get one of those up, you'd be able to tell us exactly how you took it and what we're looking at.
Well, there were a lot of very interesting phenomena that we did manage to actually see at this eclipse, and that we managed to photograph. It was a very difficult eclipse to photograph. and a difficult eclipse to see. But as you can see, there was this is the first photograph was taken just a few seconds before mid-eclipse. There's a very bright, dazzling ring of sunlight, which is still left uncovered, as you can see. Over on the left side, on the right side, you can see a fiery red hydrogen prominence, which is standing off the edge of the sun, and some of the diamonds bursting through.
Right there.
That's right.
Okay, if we go down to the photo below, this photo was taken, I guess, right in the middle of the eclipse, and here we have the diamond necklace.
Well, this is the diamond necklace, and there aren't too many photographs that have been taken like this. The unusual thing about this particular photograph is that we still see that prominence over on the right side, which is very unusual for a photograph of this kind.
It looks just like a flying saucer. In the next print, just down below, here is what I remember seeing, this beautiful red chromosphere. And this is not what we were not supposed to see this, and even a bit of corona. We're not supposed to see that.
Well, the experts said that we wouldn't see these particular phenomena, but we did. We cleaned our telescopes very carefully, and we knew exactly how to do it, how to photograph it and observe it, and that was just a beautiful sight.
We have a few more slides left, Mike, in the last few minutes. If we could go to them. One is, I think, a successful slide that we can get up. Basically, the eclipse banner and the Canadian flag. We're all very proud to be down there. If we can just get that one slide up of the banner. Very exciting to be down there, and extremely proud. We got actually there was a reporter from the LA Times who reported on the trip, and we had our name in the LA Times, and they kept referring to us Canadians, those Canadians, which was actually quite interesting. In about 15 seconds, can you sum up your feelings about the eclipse?
Well, as it turned out, it was an extremely successful eclipse. We planned it for many months. We saw far more than we ever thought we would. It's the kind of eclipse that we'll never get a chance to see again in our lifetimes, and it was just a spectacular event.
Again, Mike, thanks very much for a very successful eclipse trip, and we'll see you in November in Papua New Guinea.
That's where we're going next.
And next month, we'll see you on Astronomy Toronto. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.